Imagine for a moment that you are sitting in a theater watching a movie about your own life. You see the main character, you, making decisions, choosing partners, reacting to arguments, picking a career path. You believe that the character on screen is following a script that you wrote. But what if I told you that the director, the screenwriter, and the producer of that movie are someone else entirely? Someone you've never met face to face. There is a stranger living within your mind. A force that is older than you, vaster than you, and knows you better than you will ever know yourself. You cling to the illusion that you choose your habits, your words, and your destiny. But the reality is humbling. You choose almost nothing. Science suggests that roughly 95% of everything you do, think, and feel is determined by something you cannot see. Something that operates beneath the surface of your awareness, pulling your strings as if you were a marionette and the threads were made of invisible glass. Hello, I am Yana, and welcome to Quiet Psychology. Today, we are going to talk about the part of you that remains a stranger to you. The part that sabotages your success without you noticing. The part that handpicks the people who will break your heart. The part that forces you to repeat the same mistakes over and over again, even when you swore on your life that this time would be different. We are talking about the unconscious. Freud discovered it over 100 years ago. Carl Jung explored it like no other, and modern neuroscience has confirmed something truly disturbing. You are absolutely right when you say, "I don't know why I did that." You literally do not know, because you, the conscious you, did not decide it. Have you ever wondered why you are attracted to people who make you suffer? Why you repeat your parents' patterns even though you promised you never would? Why sometimes words fly out of your mouth and a second later you think, "Where did that come from?" That is the unconscious speaking, acting, and living your life for you. And the worst part is, the less you know it, the more power it holds over you. In this video, we are going to turn on the lights in the basement. You are going to see things that have been stored there your entire life. Your shadow, your forgotten traumas, the patterns you inherited without knowing, and the decisions you think you are making today that were actually made before you were born. This isn't fluffy self-help psychology. I'm not going to tell you to just think positive. I am going to show you the truth about who you are. And the truth is, you are not who you think you are. If this topic interests you, I invite you to check out the channel and support the work with a subscription, a like, or a comment on the video. It helps a lot. Are you ready to truly meet yourself? Let's begin. Let's start with a simple question. Why do you do what you do? I don't mean the big life decisions, I mean the small ones. Why do you prefer coffee with milk instead of black? Why do you feel uncomfortable in certain places? Why are there people you dislike instantly from the very first second without them having done anything to you? If you ask yourself this seriously, you will realize something unsettling. You don't know. You think you know. You say, "That's just how I am," or "It's my personality." But that isn't an explanation. It's a way to avoid thinking about it. The truth is that the majority of who you are, your tastes, your fears, your automatic reactions, the people you fall in love with, the ones you hate, the ones you ignore, all of that was decided without you, in a place you don't have access to, a place you didn't even know existed until a little over 100 years ago. That place has a name. It is called the unconscious, and today we are going to explore it. But before we do, I want you to perform an experiment with me right now. Try not to think of a pink elephant. Seriously, make the effort. Do not think of a pink elephant with big ears and a long trunk. Do not imagine it walking. Do not see it in your mind. What happened? Exactly. You thought of a pink elephant. You couldn't avoid it. Your conscious mind, that voice you believe controls everything, tried to give an order and failed. Something stronger than it imposed its will. That force which imposed its will, that disobeyed your direct order, is a tiny sample of what lives underneath, the unconscious. And if you cannot control something as simple as not thinking about a pink elephant, imagine how many more important things are outside of your control. For thousands of years, human beings believed they were masters of their own minds, that their thoughts were theirs, that their decisions were free. The Greek philosophers spoke of the rational soul, that divine part of the human being that separated us from animals. Plato imagined the mind as a chariot pulled by two horses, one noble and one wild, driven by a rational charioteer, reason in command, control as the ideal. Religious figures spoke of free will. God had given us the ability to choose between good and evil. We were responsible for our acts because we were free to commit them. Without freedom, there is no sin. Without consciousness, there is no guilt. And then came Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, with his famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am." As if thinking were the most evident thing in the world, as if we knew exactly what happens inside our heads, as if the eye that thinks were transparent to itself. For centuries, this was the dominant vision, the human being as a rational agent, as the owner of their mind, as the captain of their ship. But then came a Viennese doctor with a beard and a cigar in his mouth, and he sank that ship. Sigmund Freud was not a philosopher. He was a neurologist. He had studied the brain. He had worked with real patients, not with abstract ideas. And what he saw in his office did not fit the image of the rational human being. Freud worked with patients who had physical symptoms: paralysis, blindness, chronic pain, tremors, but without any medical cause. You would examine them and find nothing. The body was fine, but the patient couldn't move their arm, or couldn't see, or felt unbearable pain coming from nowhere. The doctors of his time didn't know what to do with them. They called them hysterics, a term coming from the Greek hystera, meaning uterus, because they believed it was a woman's disease caused by a wandering womb. Yes, 19th century medicine thought the uterus could move around the body and cause illness. That was the state of things. Most doctors ignored these patients, treated them as fakes, or told them they were making it up. But Freud did something different. He listened to them, and what he discovered was revolutionary. These patients weren't faking. Their suffering was real, but the cause wasn't in the body. It was in the mind, in a part of the mind they themselves didn't know. There were buried memories, forgotten traumas, repressed desires, internal conflicts that couldn't be expressed with words, so they expressed themselves with physical symptoms. A woman who couldn't swallow because there was something in her life she couldn't swallow. A man with a paralyzed arm because he had wanted to hit someone, and guilt had paralyzed his ability to act. Symptoms that seemed absurd but had a hidden logic, a symbolic logic, the logic of the unconscious. And all of that, though invisible, was affecting their lives, literally paralyzing them. Freud called it the unconscious, and with that name, a revolution was born. Imagine an iceberg. I know it's the most used analogy in the world, but it works. The part you see above the water, that small white tip, is your conscious mind. It's what you're thinking right now, the words you hear, the sensation of your body in the chair, the stream of thoughts you can follow and observe. It's the part of you that can say "I" and know what it's talking about. But under the water, in the cold darkness of the ocean, there is a gigantic mass, much larger than the tip, invisible from the surface. But there it is, holding everything else up. That is the unconscious. Everything you don't see, everything you don't know is there, but which determines the shape of the entire iceberg, decides where it floats and collides with other icebergs and ships, while you, up on the tip, believe you control the course. And when I say the part below is bigger, I'm not exaggerating. Science has tried to quantify it. Neuroscientists estimate that the brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second. 11 million every second? Information coming from your eyes, your ears, your skin, your nose, your internal organs, your entire nervous system. A constant torrent of data entering your brain. But the conscious mind, that little voice you think is you, can only process between 40 and 50 bits per second. Do the math. That means you are aware of less than 0.0005% of what your brain is doing right now. Less than a millionth part. The rest, the 99.999%, happens without you, beneath you, in spite of you. Your consciousness isn't the conductor of the orchestra. It's a spectator in the back row who thinks they're conducting because they're waving their hands to the rhythm of the music. And what is down there? What does that invisible 99% do? Everything. Your unconscious is regulating your breathing right now. You don't have to think, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It just happens. Your heart beats 70 or 80 times a minute without you giving any order. Your stomach digests the food from hours ago, breaking down molecules, absorbing nutrients, moving everything through meters of intestine without consulting you. Your pupils dilate or contract according to the light. Your temperature regulates, your wounds heal. Millions of biological processes occurring every second, without your permission, without your knowledge, without your intervention. And thank goodness, because if you had to do all that consciously, you'd die in 5 minutes. You'd forget to breathe while thinking about something else. But that's just the physiological part, the basics, what we share with any animal. The interesting part, the disturbing part, is the psychological aspect. Your unconscious also stores memories, not the memories you can evoke when you want, like your first pet's name or what you ate yesterday. Those are in conscious memory, accessible, available. You can search for them and find them like files in a folder on your computer. I'm talking about the other memories, the ones your mind decided to hide, the ones that were too painful, too confusing, too threatening to keep in sight. The ones your infant psyche couldn't process, and so it buried them. The ones that happened before you had words to name them. The ones your brain classified as danger and filed in a nameless folder, on a hard drive you don't have access to. Those memories didn't disappear. They are still there in the dark. You can't see them, but they can see you, and they watch you all the time. They influence everything you do, even if you can't point to them. Let me give you an example. Imagine a woman, let's call her Anna, who is 35 years old and has never been able to maintain a stable relationship. every time she meets someone and things start to go well. When intimacy appears, when the other person gets truly close, she sabotages. She looks for flaws she didn't see before, creates conflicts over absurd things, becomes cold, distant, critical, or simply disappears. She stops answering messages, cancels dates, leaves. She has been repeating the same pattern for 15 years, with different people in different cities, but always the same ending, and she doesn't understand why. She thinks she simply hasn't found the right person, that she has bad luck in love, that men are like that, or women, or whoever. There is always an external explanation. The problem is always the other person. But the truth isn't outside, it's inside, in her unconscious. When Anna was 4 years old, an age she barely remembers, her father left home. One day he was there eating breakfast with her, taking her to the park. The next, his room was empty, his things had disappeared, and he didn't come back. No one explained what had happened. Her mother couldn't talk about it without crying, so she didn't speak. Anna asked for weeks, "Where is Daddy?" and only received silence, evasions, or "You'll understand when you're older." And Anna, with her 4-year-old brain, with her limited capacity to process abandonment, with her world that suddenly made no sense, had no way to integrate what had happened. It was too much, too big, too painful, too incomprehensible. So her mind did what the mind does when something is too much. It buried it, repressed it, took it out of sight to keep functioning. The memory disappeared from her consciousness. Today, if you ask her about her childhood, she says, "It was normal." She doesn't remember the abandonment as traumatic. She almost doesn't remember it at all. But it didn't disappear from her. It became an invisible belief, an automatic programming burned into her nervous system, an equation her brain solved at 4 years old and never revised. People you love abandon you. Or worse, if someone truly knows you, they will leave. And every time Anna gets close to someone, every time she starts to feel love, every time she lowers her guard, every time she allows another to truly see her, that programming activates. The unconscious recognizes the pattern, intimacy, and fires the alarm, danger. Then, Anna feels anxiety without knowing why, feels the urge to flee without knowing from what, starts seeing flaws in the other without knowing she's looking for excuses, and runs away before she is abandoned again, before the trauma repeats, before she becomes that 4-year-old girl again who woke up and her father was gone. She doesn't decide to run. She doesn't think it. She doesn't choose it. She simply does it. Because she isn't the one in charge. It is the 4-year-old girl who is still alive in her unconscious, protecting her from the pain she could never process. And this, which seems like an extreme case, happens to all of us to a greater or lesser extent, with different contents, with different wounds. But the mechanism is the same. Your unconscious is full of decisions you didn't take, beliefs you didn't choose, fears you don't understand, reactions that surprise you, and all that invisible cargo directs your life, chooses for you, thinks for you, feels for you. While you, the tip of the iceberg, believe you are in command, it is as if you were sitting in the passenger seat of your own life, believing you are driving, holding a steering wheel that isn't connected to anything. But let's go back to Freud, because he didn't just discover the unconscious, he also tried to map it, to understand how it works, what's inside, what forces operate in that darkness. Freud divided the mind into three parts. Three instances, he called them, which are in constant conflict. Three characters living inside you who never agree. The first is the id, in German das Es. The id is pure instinct, pure desire, pure drive. It is the part of you that wants what it wants, regardless of the consequences, regardless of reality, regardless of anything else. The id wants food when it's hungry and wants it now, not in an hour. It wants sex when it's aroused and doesn't care if it's appropriate or not. It wants to sleep when it's tired, even if you're in the middle of an important meeting. It wants revenge when it's hurt, even if revenge destroys your life. The ID knows no morality, doesn't know right from wrong, knows no time, it cannot wait, knows no reality. It doesn't know what is possible and what isn't. It only knows two things, pleasure and pain, and it seeks one and avoids the other at any cost, by any means, without any consideration. If the id ruled your life, you would be in jail or dead, or both, because you would do whatever you wanted in every moment without thinking of the consequences. The second instance is the superego, in German das Überich. The superego is the opposite of the id. It is the voice of society inside you. It is the internal police officer, the judge, the priest, the parent looking at you with disappointment when you do something wrong. The superego contains all the rules you were taught. Everything you should do and shouldn't do. What is right and what is wrong. What is correct and what is sin. What makes you a good person and what makes you a bad person. The superego is your father telling you to behave, your mother telling you not to yell, your teacher telling you to try harder, your religion telling you to repress your desires, your culture telling you how you must live. And even if those external voices are gone, the superego internalized them, made them its own. Now they live inside you and judge you all the time. The superego is the guilt you feel when you do something forbidden, even if no one saw you. It is the shame you feel when you don't meet your own standards. It is that voice that says you are not enough every time you fail at something. It is the invisible whip with which you punish yourself. If the superego ruled your life, you would be miserable. You would never do anything for pleasure. Everything would be duty, obligation, sacrifice. You would live to satisfy others' expectations and never be good enough. And in the middle, trapped between the id and the superego, is the ego, the ich, that which you believe you are, that which you call myself. The ego is the mediator, the negotiator, the diplomat. Its job is impossible. Satisfy the desires of the id without violating the rules of the superego, and also adapt to external reality. Getting what you want in a socially acceptable way without destroying your life in the process. The id says, I want to eat that whole cake. The superego says, you're fat, you shouldn't eat sweets. What will they think of you? And the ego tries to find a compromise. Okay, I'll eat a small piece. The id says, I want to scream at my boss that he's an idiot. The superego says, you can't do that, it's disrespectful, you'll get fired. And the ego says, okay, I'll stay quiet now and look for another job. That conflict, that constant tension between what you desire and what you must do, is the engine of your psychic life. According to Freud, all neurosis, all anxiety, all depression, all unhappiness comes from there. From the id pulling one way, the superego pulling the other, and the ego exhausted, drained, divided, trying to keep the balance. Now, before you think this is just old theory from 100 years ago, let me tell you something. Modern neuroscience has confirmed much of this. not with the same names, not with the same language, but with the same mechanisms. There is a part of the brain called the limbic system. It is ancient, evolutionarily speaking. It is hundreds of millions of years old. It is in all mammals, in all reptiles. It is the emotional brain and handles basic responses: fear, anger, desire, pleasure, flight, attack. The limbic system doesn't think, it reacts. It doesn't analyze, it shoots. It sees a threat and activates fear before you know what is happening. It sees food and activates hunger. It sees a potential partner and activates desire. That, in Freudian terms, would be the id, pure instinct, pure reaction, without filter, without delay, without consciousness. And then there is the prefrontal cortex. It is much newer. Evolutionarily speaking, it is only a few million years old in its current form, and only humans have it so developed. It is the part of the brain right behind the forehead and handles executive functions: planning, reasoning, impulse control, decision-making, moral judgment. The prefrontal cortex is what allows you to think before acting, allows you to imagine consequences, allows you to say no to an impulse because you know it will hurt you later. That, in Freudian terms, would be a mix of the ego and the superego: reason, control, civilization. And what is fascinating is that these two zones, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, are in constant communication, constant negotiation, constant battle. The limbic system says, "I want this now." The prefrontal cortex says, "Wait, think about the consequences." And your behavior, what you finally do, depends on who wins in that moment. Why do you eat the piece of cake when you're on a diet? Because the limbic system won. Why do you bite your tongue when your boss says something stupid? Because the prefrontal cortex won. Why do you sometimes explode and say things you regret? Because the limbic system, the ID, took control before the cortex could intervene. There is a revealing fact. The nerve signal takes about 200 milliseconds to go from the limbic system to the prefrontal cortex. That means your emotional reaction happens before your rational mind can process it. You feel before you think. You react before you decide. And the majority of this battle, this civil war inside your head, happens without you noticing, below the level of consciousness, in what Freud called the unconscious over 100 years ago. But there is something Freud didn't fully understand, something discovered by one of his most brilliant students, who would later become his greatest rival, Carl Gustav Jung. Jung was Swiss, a psychiatrist. He was working in a mental hospital when he encountered Freud's ideas and was fascinated. Here was someone who took the inner world seriously, who listened to patients, who believed symptoms had meaning. For years, Jung was Freud's designated heir, the intellectual son, the one who would continue his legacy. They wrote letters constantly, traveled together. Freud considered him his successor, but Jung started having doubts, not about the unconscious, that was clear, but about what was in it. Freud believed everything came down to sex, that traumas, dreams, symbols, everything was sexual at the bottom, the libido as the engine of everything. Jung thought that was too simple, too reductionist, that Freud had discovered a room but not the whole house. And then came the painful, definitive break. Jung followed his own path, and what he found changed everything. Freud believed the unconscious was personal, that it contained your memories, your traumas, your repressed desires, things you had lived and then buried, your personal history turned into shadow. Jung said, "Yes, but there is more." Beneath your personal unconscious, there is another level, deeper, older, vaster. A level that isn't just yours, that you share with all of humanity, that you inherited just as you inherited the color of your eyes or the shape of your nose. Jung called it the collective unconscious. Think about this. Why do all the cultures of the world, separated by oceans, mountains, millennia of history, have such similar myths? Why are there dragons in China, in Europe, and in Mesoamerica, when those cultures never met? Why are there stories of floods in the Bible, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in Hindu traditions, in the myths of the indigenous peoples of America? Why does the hero's journey, the young man who leaves home, overcomes trials, descends to the underworld, returns transformed, appear in Greece with Odysseus, in India with Arjuna, in Japan with Momotaro, in 1,000 versions all over the planet? Coincidence? Cultural influence that somehow crossed all oceans? Freud would say yes, they are coincidences or influences we can't trace. Jung said, no, it is because we come with something pre-installed, something we don't learn, something we are. The collective unconscious is like an operating system that all humans share, basic software that comes from the factory, etched in our genes, inherited from generation to generation for hundreds of thousands of years. And that software contains patterns, molds, universal psychic structures, empty forms that fill with the content of each culture, but whose structure is identical everywhere. Jung called them archetypes. The hero is an archetype. The mother is an archetype. The father, the sage, the trickster, the divine child, the maiden, the monster, the shadow, all archetypes. They aren't specific characters. They aren't concrete stories. They are patterns that repeat over and over in all cultures, in all dreams, in all the stories we tell since we lived in caves. And according to Jung, these archetypes aren't just in myths and movies. They are in you right now, operating beneath your consciousness, shaping how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you live your life. When you fall madly in love with someone you barely know, when you feel you've found the perfect person after 2 dates, you aren't falling in love with that person. You don't know them. You barely know their name. You are falling in love with the archetype you project onto them. The anima, if you are a man. The animus, if you are a woman. An ideal image of the opposite sex that lives inside you and that you desperately seek outside. That is why falling in love is so intense and so blind. You don't see the real person. You see the archetype. And when inevitably the real person starts to show themselves different from your projection, you feel they have changed, that they aren't who they were. But nothing has changed. Simply, they never were who you thought was an archetype. When you admire a leader, a politician, a guru, a boss, an influencer, you don't just admire that person. You admire the archetype of the king, or the sage, or the hero that you project onto them. That is why the disappointment is so brutal when you discover they are human, that they have flaws, that they aren't perfect. Because it was never them who fascinated you. It was the archetype. And when you hate someone, when someone produces a visceral, inexplicable, disproportionate rejection in you, you are probably seeing in that person something you cannot stand about yourself, something you have repressed, something you deny, something that lives in your shadow. Ah, the shadow. The most important archetype of all, and the one we least want to talk about. But we will leave that for the next block. Before continuing, I want you to keep something in mind. The unconscious is not your enemy. It isn't something bad that must be eliminated. It isn't a disease that must be cured. It is simply the greater part of you, the part you don't see, the part that works in silence so you can function, the part that keeps you alive. Without the unconscious, you couldn't walk, because walking requires coordinating hundreds of muscles simultaneously, contracting and relaxing in precise sequences, adjusting balance constantly, adapting to the terrain. If you had to do it consciously, you would fall at the first step. Without the unconscious, you couldn't speak, because forming a sentence requires accessing thousands of words, selecting the right ones, applying grammatical rules, coordinating dozens of muscles in the mouth and throat, all in milliseconds. If you had to think about it, you couldn't say a single word. Without the unconscious, you couldn't drive a car, or play an instrument, or type, or do anything you have automated. Everything that comes naturally to you comes from the unconscious. The unconscious is efficiency. It is survival. It is your brain saying, "I already know how to do this. I don't need to think about it every time. I'll store it below to free up resources above." The problem isn't that it exists. The problem is that besides storing useful skills, it also stores wounds, fears, limiting beliefs, damaging patterns, unresolved traumas, unprocessed emotions. And since you don't see them, you can't change them. They remain there operating, influencing, deciding for you. It's like having a virus in your computer that doesn't appear in any folder. You know something is wrong. The computer is slow, does weird things, crashes without reason. But you can't find the infected file to delete it because it is hidden, because the system won't let you access it. Your unconscious is that file. Many files running in the background, consuming resources, determining how everything works. And the only way to clean the virus is first to find it. Make the unconscious conscious. That is what Jung said, and he was right. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about that phrase. You will call it fate, because that is what we do. When something repeats in our life, the same failed relationships, the same money problems, the same conflicts with authority, we say, "It's my fate, it's my bad luck, the same thing always happens to me." But it isn't fate, it isn't luck. It is the unconscious repeating the same program over and over until you see it, until you understand it, until you change it. So that is what we are going to do in this video. Turn on the light in the basement. Go down the stairs you never went down. Open the boxes that have been closed for decades. Look at what is inside. Even if it is uncomfortable, even if it hurts, even if you would prefer not to know. Because only by looking at it can you stop being its prisoner. In the next block, we are going to talk about what scares us most. The part of you that you deny, the part you hate, the part you project onto others so you don't see it in yourself. The part Jung called the shadow. See you there. Block 2, the shadow. Not because it is far away, not because it is hard to find, but because you have spent your entire life running from it. It is called the shadow, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is the darkness you project when the light hits you. It is everything you are but do not want to be. Everything you feel but do not want to feel. Everything you desire but do not dare to desire. It is the part of you that you hid in the basement a long time ago, that you locked up with a key, that you swore did not exist. But it is still there, alive, growing in the dark. And the more you ignore it, the more power it has over you. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist we spoke of earlier, dedicated a large part of his life to studying the shadow. Not because he was fascinated by the dark, but because he understood something fundamental. He understood that you cannot be a complete person if you deny half of who you are. "I'd rather be whole than good," Jung said. And that phrase summarizes everything we are going to explore now. Because the shadow is not evil, it is not the devil, it is not something to be destroyed. It is simply everything you rejected about yourself. And you rejected many more things than you think. Think about when you were a child. You were born being everything. You could cry when you wanted, scream when you wanted, hit when you were angry, say what you thought without a filter, touch your body without shame, be selfish, be cruel, be tender, be wild, be everything at once without contradiction. But then came the adults, your parents, your teachers, your culture, your religion, and they started telling you which parts of you were acceptable and which were not. Good boys don't hit. Good girls don't scream. Don't cry, that's for the weak. Don't be selfish. Don't touch yourself there. Don't say that. Don't feel that. Don't be that. And you, being a child who needed love, who needed approval, who needed to belong, did what any child would do. You obeyed. Not because you understood why, but because the alternative was losing the love of the people who kept you alive. So you started to cut off parts of yourself, to amputate pieces of your soul, to put into boxes everything you shouldn't be, and to hide those boxes in the basement. Your unacceptable rage, to the basement. Your shameful sexuality, to the basement. Your bad selfishness, to the basement. Your weak vulnerability, to the basement. Your dangerous aggression, to the basement. Your ugly envy, to the basement. And little by little, you built a version of yourself that was acceptable, a version others applauded, a version that fit in, a version that received love. Jung called that version the persona, the mask, the character you play for the world. And everything left out, everything you cut off and hid, he called the shadow. But here is the problem. What you put in the basement doesn't die. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't stay quiet waiting. It stays alive, keeps growing, and keeps trying to get out. Have you ever exploded with rage over something small and surprised yourself? Have you said horrible things in an argument? Things you didn't even know you thought? Have you felt a dark impulse, a disturbing thought, a desire that shames you? And have you wondered where that came from? That is the shadow. Escaping from the basement, taking advantage of a moment of weakness, a moment when your guard is down, to come to the surface. And when it comes out, it scares you, because you don't recognize that as part of you, because you have spent years convincing yourself that you aren't like that. That rage, that cruelty, that selfishness aren't yours. But they are yours. They are as much yours as your kindness, as your generosity, as all the nice qualities you like to show. The shadow isn't an invader, it is an exile. It is part of you living in banishment. And what you do not recognize in yourself, you will see in others. This is perhaps the most important thing we are going to say today. So listen closely. What you deny in yourself, you project onto others. Projection is a defense mechanism. It works like this. There is something in you that you cannot accept, something so threatening, so incompatible with your self-image, that your mind refuses to see it. So it takes it out of you and puts it on someone else. It projects it, just like a movie projector projects an image onto a screen. Suddenly, that horrible flaw you cannot tolerate, isn't in you anymore. It is in your neighbor, in your boss, in that politician you hate, in your ex-partner, in that group of people you find despicable. And you can hate it out there with total peace of mind, without having to look at it inside. Do you know someone who causes a visceral rejection in you? Not a rational disagreement, not normal antipathy. I'm talking about something more intense, something that turns your stomach, something that makes you clench your teeth, someone whose mere presence or mention alters you disproportionately. Think of that person. Think about what exactly bothers you about them. Their arrogance, their selfishness, their hypocrisy, their weakness, their aggression, their way of seeking attention. Now comes the uncomfortable part. That thing that bothers you so much about that person probably lives in your shadow. Probably it is something you also have, but cannot admit. Probably it is an exile from your own basement, which you recognize when you see it in another, but not when you look in the mirror. The one who criticizes others' arrogance most often has an unacknowledged arrogance. The one who points out others' selfishness most often has a selfishness they deny. The one who condemns others' sexuality most often has a repressed sexuality that terrifies them. Not always, not in every case. Sometimes we hate things simply because they are hateful. But when the hate is disproportionate, when the emotion is more intense than the situation justifies, there is projection. There is shadow. Jung said it brilliantly. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Your enemies are your teachers. They show you what you cannot see in yourself. Let me give you an example. Imagine a man, let's call him Pedro, who grew up in a family where showing weakness was unacceptable. His father was tough, never cried, never complained, never asked for help. And Pedro learned, without anyone telling him explicitly, that being a man meant being strong, always, without exception. So Pedro put his vulnerability in the basement, locked that door with a key, and built an identity based on strength. He never asks for help, never admits something overwhelms him, never, under any circumstances, cries. Now Pedro is 40 years old, and there is something he cannot stand. There is a type of person who produces a visceral rejection in him, sensitive men. Those who talk about their emotions, who cry in public, who ask for help. Pedro despises them, calls them weak, soft, pathetic. When he sees a man crying, he feels disgust, anger, second-hand embarrassment. Why? Because that man crying reminds him of the part of himself he had to kill. It reminds him of the boy he was before they taught him that crying was wrong. It reminds him of his buried vulnerability. That vulnerability that is still alive in the basement, banging on the door, asking to come out. Pedro doesn't hate sensitive men. Pedro hates his own unacknowledged sensitivity. And since he cannot hate it in himself, he hates it in others. The day Pedro can cry, he will stop despising those who cry. The day he integrates his vulnerability, he will stop projecting it. The day he opens the basement door, his enemies will disappear. Because they were never real enemies. They were mirrors. This also works with positive qualities. We don't just project what we hate about ourselves, we also project what we dare not be. Jung called this the golden shadow. There are people who fascinate you, whom you deeply admire, whom you put on a pedestal, people whose creativity, charisma, freedom, courage seem unattainable to you. You look at them and think, I could never be like that. What if I told you that what you admire so much in them is also in you. That the reason their creativity fascinates you is because you have a repressed creativity. That the reason you envy their freedom is because you have a freedom you do not allow yourself. The golden shadow contains your unlived potentials, your unexplored talents, the greatness you are afraid to claim. Sometimes we hide in the basement not only the bad, but also the good. Because shining too bright is also dangerous. Because standing out can bring envy, rejection, loneliness. Because sometimes it is safer to be small. So we bury our light along with our darkness, and then we worship it in others without knowing we are worshiping lost parts of ourselves. This explains why we create idols, why we worship celebrities, leaders, gurus. It isn't just admiration, it is projection. We put onto them everything we dare not be, and then we follow them, imitate them, venerate them as if they were gods. And when they fall, when we discover they are human, that they have flaws, that they weren't perfect, we feel a deep betrayal. We feel anger, disappointment, because unknowingly we had put our own golden shadow onto them, and now we don't know what to do with it. The solution isn't to stop admiring. The solution is to claim what you admire. To realize that if you can see it in another, it is because it also exists in you. Maybe asleep, maybe atrophied, maybe scared, but there. Now let's go to something darker, because the shadow isn't just individual, it is also collective. If every person has a shadow, then every group also has one. Every family, every culture, every nation, every religion, every ideology. The collective shadow is everything a group denies about itself and projects onto others. Why do scapegoats exist? Because throughout history, human groups have always found someone to blame for their problems. The Jews in medieval Europe, the witches in Salem, immigrants in any era, heretics, infidels, the different ones. Because it is easier to project evil outwards than to recognize it inwards. Nazi Germany didn't invent cruelty. Cruelty was already there, in the collective shadow of a humiliated, impoverished, resentful nation. Hitler didn't create the hate. He channeled it, gave it a target. He said, "All the bad is in the Jews." And millions of people sighed in relief, because if the evil was outside, they could continue feeling good. The Holocaust was not committed by monsters. It was committed by normal people who had projected their shadow onto a group and decided to exterminate it. Fathers, civil servants, doctors. People who, after a day of work in the concentration camps, went home and played with their children. That is the most terrifying thing about the collective shadow. It doesn't require conscious malice. It only requires denial. It only requires projection. It only requires not looking. And this isn't just history. This is happening right now, everywhere. When a country says, "We are the good guys and they are the bad guys," collective shadow. When a religion says, "Our faith is the true one and the others are false," collective shadow. When a political group says, "We are right and the others are the problem," collective shadow. I am not saying there aren't real differences. I am not saying everything is relative. There are better and worse things. There are more and less ethical actions. But when certainty is absolute, when there is no doubt, no self-criticism, no recognition of one's own shadow, then we are on dangerous ground. Because the one who is sure that evil is only outside is the most dangerous of all. They are the one who can commit atrocities while feeling virtuous. Jung understood this better than anyone. He had seen 2 world wars. He had seen how civilized people, cultured Europeans, educated, with centuries of philosophy and art, could turn into mass murderers. And he wondered, how is it possible? The answer is the shadow. When you do not look at your own darkness, when you deny it, repress it, project it, then you are at its mercy. It can take control at any moment, and it will when conditions are right. That is why Jung insisted so much on shadow integration. Not to justify evil, not to say that anything goes, but so that evil does not control you without you knowing, so that you can choose consciously instead of acting blindly. I know my darkness, Jung said, and that is why I can deal with the darkness of others. So, how is the shadow integrated? How do you open the basement door without the monsters devouring you? The first thing is to recognize that it exists. It seems obvious, but it isn't. Most people live in total denial. They believe they are exactly who they think they are, that their self-image is complete and accurate, that nothing is hidden. But you already know that isn't true. You already know there is a basement. You already know there are locked boxes. The simple fact that you are listening to this means you are willing to look. The second thing is to pay attention to your emotional reactions, especially the intense ones, especially the disproportionate ones. When something infuriates you more than it should, ask yourself why. When someone produces a visceral rejection in you, ask yourself what is in that person that is also in you. When you feel envy, shame, contempt, do not run from those emotions. Follow them. They are clues, signs from the basement. The third thing is to look at your dreams. Dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, Freud said. And he was right. When you sleep, your conscious mind shuts off and the shadow comes out to play. Have you ever dreamed that you did something terrible? Something violent, sexual, shameful? Something you would never do awake? That doesn't mean you are a bad person. It means your shadow is expressing itself in the only space where it can. Do not ignore those dreams. Do not forget them quickly because they make you uncomfortable. Look at them. Ask yourself which part of you is trying to speak. The fourth thing is to listen to the criticisms you receive, especially the ones that hurt, especially the ones you reject immediately. When someone tells you something about yourself and your first reaction is defensive, anger, that's not true. Stop, breathe, and consider the possibility that there is some truth in it. Not everything they tell you is true, but the criticisms that hurt the most usually touch something real. They usually point to the basement. If someone says, "You are selfish," and it doesn't affect you, you probably don't have selfishness in the shadow. But if they say, "You are selfish," and you feel intense rage, an urgent need to defend yourself, to prove it's not true, then maybe there is something there. Maybe selfishness is one of your exiles. The fifth and perhaps most difficult thing is to accept that you are capable of everything. Yes, everything. You are capable of lying, of stealing, of betraying, of hurting who you love, of being cruel, of being a coward, of being everything you despise in others. I'm not saying you do it. I'm not saying you will, but you are capable. Under the right circumstances, with enough pressure, you could do things that seem unthinkable today. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. It is the humility of recognizing that you are human, completely human with all that implies. And paradoxically, recognizing that you are capable of everything makes you less likely to do it because you are no longer blind. You no longer believe you are immune. You know where the danger is, and you can watch it. The one who says, "I would never do that," is the one closest to doing it, because they do not know their shadow. They do not know what they are capable of, and when the pressure comes, they will be taken by surprise. Jung told a story. He said that once a patient confessed a terrible crime he had committed, something unforgivable. And Jung, instead of being horrified, told him, "Thank you for telling me, because if you are capable of doing it, I am too." That is integrating the shadow. It isn't justifying evil. It is recognizing that evil is not just outside, it is also inside, and that only by seeing it can you choose not to feed it. There is a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the Russian writer who survived the Soviet concentration camps, that captures this perfectly. After years of suffering, of seeing human cruelty up close, he wrote, "The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart. Every human heart. Yours, mine, everyone's. There are no good guys and bad guys. There are people who know their darkness and people who deny it. And those who deny it are the most dangerous." Now I want you to understand something important. Integrating the shadow does not mean acting out everything in it. It does not mean that if you have repressed aggression, you should go out and hit someone. It does not mean that if you have dark desires, you should fulfill them. It does not mean giving free rein to everything. Integrating means recognizing, accepting that it exists, giving it space inside you without letting it take control. You can have anger without being violent. You can have desires without acting on everyone. You can have darkness without being evil. The difference is consciousness. The one who knows their rage can choose what to do with it. The one who denies it will be possessed by it at the worst moment. Jung used the metaphor of the dog on a leash. Your shadow is like a big, powerful dog. If you pretend it doesn't exist, it runs loose and can bite anyone. If you recognize it and keep it on a leash, it is still powerful, but you control it. You can even use its strength when you need it. Integrated anger becomes the capacity to set boundaries, strength to defend yourself, energy to change what isn't working. Integrated sexuality becomes passion, creativity, vitality. Integrated selfishness becomes healthy self-love, the ability to take care of yourself, knowing how to say no. Everything in the shadow has a luminous version. Everything you repressed has positive potential. But you can only access that potential if you first accept the dark version. There is a Sufi story that illustrates this. A man was walking through the desert when he saw a chained demon. The demon begged him to release him. The man was afraid, but something compelled him to do it. He broke the chains, and the demon, instead of attacking him, transformed into an angel. He told him, "Thank you. When they chained me, I became a demon. By releasing me, I returned to being what I was." That is the shadow. Demons that were angels before you chained them. Parts of you that became monstrous because you treated them like monsters. Release them, and maybe you'll discover they weren't what they seemed. Before ending this block, I want to talk to you about something you are probably feeling right now. Resistance. While you listen to this, a part of you is saying, "This isn't about me. I already know myself pretty well. My shadow isn't that big. She's exaggerating." That voice is the resistance. It is the guardian of the basement. It is the part of you that has spent years protecting those closed boxes and does not want you to open them. Resistance is normal. It is natural, It is even healthy to a certain extent. It protected you for years, allowed you to function without having to face everything at once. But it is also what keeps you stuck, what makes you repeat the same patterns, what prevents you from being complete. So if you feel resistance, don't attack it. Don't get frustrated with yourself. Just recognize it. Tell it, I know you're there. I know you're trying to protect me. But now I am ready to look. And if you aren't ready, that's okay. No one forces you. You can close this video right now and go on with your life. But if you keep listening, if something in you wants to know more, then trust that. Trust the part of you that chose to be here, that chose to look, that chose, despite the fear, to go down the basement stairs. In the next block, we are going to talk about how the unconscious controls your daily life, how it chooses your relationships, how it sabotages your projects, how it repeats patterns you swore you wouldn't repeat. And we are going to talk about how to change it, how to reprogram what is wrongly programmed, how to stop being a prisoner of something you didn't even know existed. Block 3. Patterns. There is something that has probably happened to you more than once. You swore you wouldn't do it again. You swore that this time would be different, that you had learned the lesson, that you would never fall for the same thing again. And yet, here you are, in the same situation again, with the same type of person again, making the same mistake again, feeling exactly the same way as the last time you swore you wouldn't feel like this. How is it possible? If you are smart, if you already know what hurts you, if you already identified the pattern, if you already saw it coming, why? Why do you keep falling? Because it isn't you who decides. It is your unconscious. And your unconscious doesn't want you to change. It wants you to repeat. Freud called it the compulsion to repeat, and it is one of the most disturbing discoveries in all of psychology. The idea is simple, but its implications are devastating. Freud observed that his patients didn't just remember their traumas. They repeated them over and over in different forms with different people, but always the same underlying script. The woman who was abandoned by her father chooses partners who abandon her. The man who was humiliated as a child seeks situations where he will be humiliated. The person who grew up with violence finds violent relationships, not out of conscious masochism, not because they like to suffer, but because the unconscious seeks the familiar, even if the familiar is painful. This seems absurd. It seems to contradict all logic. Why would we seek to repeat what hurt us? There are several reasons, and none are pretty. The first is that the unconscious doesn't distinguish between familiar and good. For the unconscious, the known is safe, the unknown is dangerous. Even if the known is pain, at least it is pain you already know, predictable pain, pain you know how to handle. Your nervous system was formed in childhood. It learned what to expect from the world. It learned what was normal. And now, decades later, it keeps looking for that normality, even if that normality was toxic. If you grew up with chaos, chaos will seem normal to you. Calm will seem suspicious, uncomfortable, boring. And without realizing it, you will seek chaos, you will create chaos, because it is what you know. If you grew up with emotional coldness, intimacy will seem threatening. When someone gets truly close, you will feel anxiety, you will want to flee, and you will look for cold people, because that is what your nervous system recognizes as a relationship. If you grew up having to earn love, unconditional love will seem fake. You won't believe it, you will distrust it, and you will look for people who make you earn their affection because that is what you learned love was. It isn't logic, it's programming. And programming isn't changed with good intentions. The second reason for repetition is deeper and has to do with something the unconscious tries to do, even if it doesn't look like it. It tries to heal. It sounds contradictory. How can repeating the same pain be healing? But think of it this way. When something traumatic happened to you as a child, you couldn't process it. You didn't have the tools, you didn't have the power, you didn't have the words. The trauma remained frozen in your system, incomplete, unresolved, and your unconscious, in its strange logic, believes that if it recreates the original situation, this time you will be able to resolve it. This time you will win. This time the ending will be different. The woman who chooses men who abandon her is unconsciously trying to rewrite history. She is looking for the father who left, so that this time she can make him stay. So this time she can be enough. So this time she can prove she is worthy of love. Of course, it doesn't work. Because it isn't the same father. Because she isn't a child anymore. Because the situation is different, even if it feels the same. And trauma isn't resolved by repeating it. It is resolved by processing it. But the unconscious doesn't know that, so it keeps trying again and again. It's like watching the same movie expecting a different ending. But the script is already written, and as long as you don't change the script, the ending will be the same. The third reason is perhaps the hardest to hear. Sometimes we repeat to confirm what we already believe. If deep down you believe you are not worthy of love, you will look for proof of that. You will choose people who treat you badly. You will sabotage relationships that go well. You will do whatever is necessary to confirm your original belief. Because being wrong, even about something painful, is more threatening than being right. Because if it turns out you are worthy of love, then what? Then you have to rethink your whole life, your whole identity, everything you thought you knew about yourself. It is easier, more comfortable to keep being right, even if being right means I don't deserve love. Even if being right means things always go wrong for me. Even if being right means people always disappoint me. Negative beliefs are self-confirming. They are self-fulfilling prophecies. And the unconscious works day and night to make them reality. Because for the unconscious, being right is more important than being happy. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine a man, let's call him Carlos, who is 40 years old and has never had a relationship that lasts more than 2 years. He has had many. It always starts with hope. He always thinks, this one is different. And always, at some point, everything falls apart. Sometimes they leave him, sometimes he leaves, sometimes there is a betrayal, sometimes it just fades. But the result is always the same. Carlos alone. Carlos has an explanation. He says he hasn't found the right person. He says women, or men, it doesn't matter, these days don't want to commit. He says he has bad luck in love. He says many things, all looking outward. But if you look at his history, and if you look truthfully, you will see a pattern. Carlos chooses emotionally unavailable partners, people who just got out of another relationship, people living in another city, people who make it clear from the beginning they don't want anything serious. Carlos chooses them, and then gets surprised when they don't want anything serious. And when occasionally he meets someone who is available, who does want commitment, who is present, Carlos loses interest. He says he doesn't feel a spark. He says it's too easy. He says there's no chemistry. What is really happening? Carlos grew up with a depressed mother, a mother who was physically present but emotionally absent, a mother who was sometimes there and sometimes vanished into her own inner world. Carlos never knew which mother he was going to find when he got home. And Carlos, being a child, did what children do. He tried to earn her attention, tried to be perfect, tried to be funny, tried everything so his mother would see him, so his mother would be present. Sometimes it worked. The mother would come back, and those moments were magical, intense, full of desperate joy. But then she would leave again, and Carlos would go back to trying again and again. What did Carlos learn about love? That love is chasing, that love is earning, that love is intermittent, that love comes and goes, that you have to fight for it always, because at any moment it can disappear. And now, 30 years later, Carlos keeps looking for his mother. He keeps choosing people who are there and not there. He keeps feeling that spark, which isn't a spark, it's anxiety, when someone is unreachable. And he keeps feeling uncomfortable, bored, when someone is simply there. Carlos doesn't have bad luck. Carlos has a pattern burned into his unconscious before he could speak. A pattern that remains active 30 years later, directing his choices without him knowing. And as long as Carlos keeps looking outside, as long as he keeps blaming women, luck, the era, nothing will ever change. Because the problem isn't outside. The problem is in the basement, in that child who is still waiting for his mother to come back. But it isn't just relationships. Unconscious patterns affect everything. Your relationship with money, your relationship with work, your relationship with your body, your relationship with success, your relationship with yourself. Everything is contaminated by programming you didn't choose. Do you know someone who is always in financial crisis? No matter how much they earn, no matter what opportunities they have, there is always an emergency. Money is always missing. They are always on the edge. Maybe they have a pattern of financial self-sabotage. Maybe they grew up hearing that money is bad, or that rich people are corrupt, or that we are poor but honest. Maybe they have an unconscious loyalty to their parents, and earning more than them feels like a betrayal. Maybe they associate money with something negative and repel it without realizing it. Consciously they want money, they work hard, they have good plans, but their unconscious has another plan, and the unconscious always wins. Do you know someone who sabotages their success just when they were about to achieve it? Who gets sick before the important interview? Who fights with their boss just when they were going to be promoted? Who abandons projects at 90%? They might have a fear of success. It sounds absurd. Who is afraid of success? But it is more common than you think. Success brings visibility, brings expectations, brings responsibility, brings the possibility of falling from higher up. If you grew up being criticized for standing out, if you learned that excelling was dangerous, if your family punished those who thought they were better, then success feels threatening, and your unconscious will do everything possible to avoid it, to keep you small, to keep you safe. Do you know someone who always chooses jobs below their capability? Who has talent to spare but never fully uses it? Who could do great things but settles for less? They might have an invisible ceiling, a limit their unconscious set a long time ago. People like me don't get there. That is for others, not for me. Who do I think I am to try? That ceiling isn't real. It isn't written in any law of the universe. But it feels real. It feels like a glass wall you can't pass through. And you can't, as long as you don't know it's there. All of this is the unconscious working silently, efficiently, relentlessly. And the most frustrating part is that it does it with good intentions. The unconscious is not your enemy. It doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to protect you. But it protects you from dangers that no longer exist, using strategies it learned decades ago when you were a child who had no other options. The child who learned to be invisible to avoid abuse is now an adult who cannot stand out. The child who learned to please to be loved is now an adult who doesn't know how to say no. The child who learned that emotions were dangerous is now an adult who cannot feel. The strategies that saved you then limit you now. But the unconscious doesn't know that. It keeps applying the old rules in a world that has already changed. It's as if you had a bodyguard you hired when you were a child. A bodyguard who protected you from real threats, who did a good job, who kept you alive. But now you are 40 years old. The threats no longer exist, and the bodyguard is still there, still protecting you from everything. He doesn't let you get close to anyone, doesn't let you take risks, doesn't let you live. And when you try to fire him, he refuses. He says, "You don't know what's out there. I saved you once. Trust me." The problem is that the bodyguard no longer distinguishes between real danger and normal life. For him, everything is a threat. Everything is risk. Everything is potentially deadly. Your job isn't to destroy the bodyguard. Your job is to update him. Teach him that you are no longer a child, that now you have resources, that now you can handle things you couldn't before, that some of the threats he fights no longer exist. But to update the bodyguard, first you have to talk to him. And to talk to him, you have to know he exists. There is a way to detect your unconscious patterns. A simple way, though not easy. Look at your life. Not what you say you want. Look at what you have. Because your life is the mirror of your unconscious. What is outside reflects what is inside. Not always directly, not always obviously, but there is always a connection. If you say you want a relationship, but have been alone for years, there is a pattern. If you say you want money, but are always in crisis, there is a pattern. If you say you want health, but keep smoking, eating badly, not exercising, there is a pattern. I am not blaming you. I am not saying it is your conscious fault. I am saying there is a part of you that you don't know that is creating these results. And until you know it, you will keep creating them. Another way to detect patterns is to look at what repeats. What situations appear over and over in your life? What kind of problems chase you? What kind of people do you always find? What emotions do you feel frequently regardless of circumstances? If you always feel undervalued in all jobs, with all partners, in all groups, the pattern isn't in others, it is in you. There is something in you creating that experience or interpreting everything as they don't value me. If you always end up betrayed, if all your friendships end in betrayal, if all your relationships end in cheating, the pattern isn't in the wickedness of the world. There is something in you that chooses people who betray, or provokes betrayals, or interprets anything as betrayal. It's not that others don't have responsibility, they do, but you are the common denominator of all your experiences. And that means you have power. Power to change the pattern if you see it. Another way to detect patterns is to listen to what you say. The phrases you repeat are windows into the unconscious. That's just how I am. The same thing always happens to me. People are like that. I can't help it. That's not for me. Each of those phrases is a belief, and each belief is a program running in the background, filtering your reality, creating your experience. Pay attention to what you say, especially what you say without thinking, what you say as if it were obvious, what you say as if it were a universal truth, when in reality it is just your truth, your programming, your pattern. And pay attention to how you react when someone questions those phrases. If someone tells you, "It doesn't have to be like that," and you feel irritation, resistance, a desire to defend your position, there is something important there. There you are protecting a pattern. There is a bodyguard who doesn't want you to look too closely. There is something else I want you to understand about patterns, something that can be hard to accept. Patterns have secondary benefits. Yes, even if they make you suffer, they give you something. Even if they are dysfunctional, they fulfill a function. The person who is always sick maybe receives attention and care that way. The person who always fails maybe avoids the responsibility of success that way. The person who is always in drama maybe feels alive, important, in the center of something that way. I am not saying it is conscious. I am not saying they do it on purpose. But there is a part of the unconscious that has found something valuable in the pattern and doesn't want to let it go. That is why changing is so difficult. Not only do you have to face the pain of the pattern, you also have to give up its benefits. And sometimes those benefits are the only thing you know, the only thing that makes you feel safe, the only thing that gives you an identity. I am the person who always has bad luck. I am the person who sacrifices everything for others. I am the person who never finds love. Those are identities, and letting go of an identity, even a victim identity, is terrifying. Because if you are no longer that, who are you? If you are no longer defined by your suffering, how do you define yourself? If you no longer have that drama that fills the void, many people prefer known suffering to unknown emptiness, and the unconscious knows it. That is why it protects patterns with such ferocity. Now, how do you break a pattern? The first and most important thing is to see it. Make it conscious, because while it is invisible, it controls you completely. But the moment you see it, it starts to lose power. Not all its power. Seeing it isn't enough to change it, but it is the first step. It is the light entering the basement. It is the beginning of the end of blind repetition. The second thing is to understand where it comes from. Trace the pattern to its origin. When did it start? What situation created it? What did you learn? What did you decide about yourself, about others, about life? Sometimes the origin is obvious, a clear trauma, a specific event. But sometimes it is more subtle, an accumulation of small moments, an emotional climate, something no one said but was felt in the air. You can't always find the exact origin, and it isn't always necessary. But when you find it, when you connect the present pattern with the past wound, something changes. A bridge is created between the adult you are and the child you were. And that bridge is the path of healing. The third thing is to feel what you couldn't feel. Patterns aren't changed with just thought. They are changed with emotion, with body, with experience. When the trauma happened, there were emotions you couldn't process. Fear, anger, sadness, pain. Emotions that were too big, too intense, too dangerous. And you froze them, stored them, put them in the basement along with everything else. Those frozen emotions are the fuel of the pattern. While they remain there, the pattern will remain active. But if you unfreeze them, if you finally feel them, if you let them move and complete themselves, the pattern loses its energy. That is why therapy works when it works. Not because someone tells you what to do, but because you create a safe space where you can finally feel what you couldn't feel, where you can cry the tears you saved, where you can express the rage you swallowed, where you can shake off the fear you froze. The body keeps the score, and the body needs to complete what was left incomplete. The fourth thing is to create new experiences. The unconscious doesn't learn from theories, it learns from experiences. You cannot convince it with arguments. You have to show it with facts that reality can be different. If your pattern is "no one loves me," you need experiences of being loved. Not just thinking "I am lovable." You need to feel it, live it, let it in. And here is the hard part. Your unconscious is going to resist those new experiences. It is going to filter them, minimize them, find reasons to discard them. Yes, he loves me, but it's because he doesn't really know me. Yes, she was kind, but surely she wants something. Yes, they told me I did well, but they were just being polite. Your job is to let the positive experiences in. Let them touch the unconscious. Don't rationalize them. Don't discard them. Let them count. Let them add up. Let them little by little rewrite the old story. It isn't fast. The unconscious took years to form. It won't change in a week, but every new experience counts. Every moment of being seen, valued, loved is a drop filling a new glass. And when the new glass is fuller than the old one, the pattern will change. The fifth thing is to practice conscious choice. Patterns are automatic. They happen without thinking. You react before realizing. You choose before knowing you are choosing. The practice is to create a space, a small space between the stimulus and the response. A moment of pause where you can ask yourself, what am I about to do? Is it the pattern? Is it really what I want? Is there another option? At first, that space will be small, almost non-existent. The pattern is fast and you are slow. But with practice, the space grows. The pause lengthens. And in that pause, you can choose differently. Not always, not perfectly. There will be relapses. There will be moments where the pattern wins. But every time you choose differently, even once, you are creating a new neural path. You are weakening the old circuit and strengthening a new one. It's like a trail in the forest. The old pattern is a well-traveled road. Clear, easy, automatic. The new option is barely a footprint among the trees. Hard to see, hard to follow. But every time you choose it, it becomes clearer. And every time you avoid the old road, it gets covered in weeds. There is something else I want to tell you before ending this block. Patterns don't disappear entirely. They aren't deleted like files from a computer. They are integrated, transformed, become less compulsive, more optional. You will always have that part of you that learned the old lessons. You will always have that wounded child somewhere in the basement. But they don't have to direct your life. They don't have to choose for you. They can be there, recognized, cared for, integrated without taking control. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal isn't to have no shadow or patterns or wounds. The goal is to know them, see them coming, choose consciously when you can, instead of reacting automatically. And when you can't, when the pattern wins, treat yourself with compassion, not with the whip, not with the same thing again, but with, it's okay, it's human, tomorrow I'll try again. Because the war against yourself is also a pattern, and perhaps the most damaging of all. In the next block, the last one, we are going to talk about integration, about how to make peace with your unconscious, about how to turn the enemy into an ally, about how to use all that energy that was trapped in the basement to create a different life. We are going to talk about what happens when you stop running from yourself and finally find yourself. See you there. Block 4. Integration and Conclusion. We have reached the end of the journey, or perhaps the beginning, because everything we have explored in these 2 hours, the unconscious, the shadow, the patterns, the compulsive repetition, is useless if it stays as information, if it stays as how interesting, if tomorrow you keep living exactly the same as yesterday. Knowledge without action is entertainment, and this is not entertainment. This is your life. So in this last block, we are going to talk about the most important thing, about how to integrate all this, about how to make peace with the parts of you that you have rejected for decades, about how to turn the enemy into an ally, about how to use all that energy you had trapped in the basement to create a life you actually want to live. We are going to talk about what happens when you stop running from yourself and finally find yourself. Jung had a term for this process. He called it individuation. Individuation is the path toward becoming who you really are, not who they told you should be, not who society expects you to be, not the mask you have been wearing since you were 5 years old, but you, in your totality, in your wholeness. And to get there, you have to integrate everything you separated. You have to recover all the parts you exiled. You have to open all the boxes in the basement one by one and say, "This is also me." It isn't easy, it isn't fast, it isn't comfortable, but it is the only path toward an authentic life. Because as long as you remain divided, as long as you remain at war with yourself, you will never have peace. You will never have all your energy available. There will always be a part of you fighting against another part. You will always be spending resources on keeping the basement doors closed. Integration frees that energy. Integration ends the civil war. Integration returns you to yourself. But what exactly does it mean to integrate? It does not mean acting out everything in your shadow. We said it before, but it is worth repeating. Integrating your rage does not mean going out to hit people. Integrating your sexuality does not mean acting on every impulse. Integrating your selfishness does not mean trampling on others. Integrating means recognizing. It means accepting. It means giving it space. It means saying, "Yes, I have rage. Rage is part of me. I am not going to pretend it doesn't exist. I am not going to be ashamed of it. But I am also not going to let it control me. I can feel it and choose what I do with it." That is the difference between repression and integration. Repression says, "This does not exist." Integration says, "This exists, and I decide what to do with it." Repression takes away your power. Integration gives it back. Think of it this way. Imagine your psyche is a big house, a house with many rooms. Some rooms you use every day. The kitchen, the living room, your bedroom. Those are the parts of you that you know, the parts you show, the parts you accept. But there are other rooms you closed a long time ago. Dark rooms, dusty rooms, rooms where you stored everything you didn't want to see. You locked them with a key, put furniture in front of the doors, pretended they didn't exist, and for years it worked. You could live in the rooms you liked and ignore the others. You could pretend your house was smaller than it really was. But there is a problem. Those closed rooms are still part of your house. They still consume energy. They still affect the structure. And what is inside is still alive, still growing, still banging on the doors. Integrating is opening those doors. It is entering those rooms. It is cleaning the dust, opening the windows, letting the light in. It is recovering space that was always yours, but which you had abandoned. At first, it is scary. You don't know what you're going to find. You haven't entered in so long that the stories you tell yourself about what is inside are probably worse than reality. But when you enter, when you really look, you discover something surprising. What is there isn't as monstrous as you thought. It is just abandoned. It is just forgotten. It is just parts of you that needed to be seen. And when you see them, when you recognize them, when you tell them, "You are part of me and I accept you," something changes. The energy you spent keeping the doors closed is released. The parts that were at war start to collaborate. The whole house becomes inhabitable. There is an exercise I want to propose to you. It is simple, but powerful, and you can do it right now if you want. Think of something about yourself you cannot stand. Something that shames you. Something you hide. It can be a flaw, a desire, a fear, a part of your history. Something that if others knew, you think they would reject you. Got it? Now, instead of running from that, I want you to look at it, to recognize it, to say out loud if you can, these words, "This is also me. I don't like it. Maybe I want to change it. But right now, this is part of me. And I accept myself with this included." What do you feel when saying that? Probably resistance. Probably discomfort. Probably a voice saying, "No, I can't accept this. This has to change first." That voice is the superego. It is the internal judge. It is the part of you that has spent years telling you that you aren't enough as you are. That first you have to improve. That first you have to fix your flaws. That acceptance comes after when you are worthy of it. But it is a lie. Acceptance does not come after change. Acceptance is what allows change. As long as you reject a part of yourself, that part defends itself, hides deeper, becomes more reactive. It is like trying to tame a wild animal by attacking it. It doesn't work. The animal only becomes wilder. But when you accept, when you stop attacking, when you say it is okay that you are here, then the animal calms down. Then it can start to trust. Then it can start to change. Not because you force it, but because it no longer needs to defend itself. The paradox is this: you can only change what you first accept. While you reject it, it will remain exactly the same. This goes against everything we were taught. We were taught that accepting ourselves is conformism, that if we accept ourselves as we are, we will never improve, that we need the whip of self-criticism to advance. But has that worked for you? How many years have you been criticizing yourself, and how much have you really changed? How many times have you told yourself, "This is wrong with me"? And how many times has that produced real, lasting change? Self-criticism does not produce change. It produces shame. And shame does not motivate, it paralyzes. Shame does not illuminate, it hides. Shame does not transform, it freezes. What produces real change is self-compassion. It is looking at yourself with the eyes you would use to look at a dear friend. It is telling yourself what you would tell someone you love. I understand why you are like this. It makes sense given what you lived through. It isn't your fault, and still, you can choose differently. That is integration. It isn't applauding your flaws, it is understanding them. It isn't giving up, it is stopping the fight with yourself so you can use that energy on something constructive. There is another important thing about integration. It isn't an event, it is a process. It isn't something you do once and that's it. It is something you do every day, your whole life. Because there will always be more shadow. There will always be more layers. There will always be new aspects of yourself to discover, accept, integrate. Jung said individuation is the work of a lifetime. It doesn't end. You don't reach a point where you say, "That's it, I am completely conscious, I no longer have an unconscious." That doesn't exist. The unconscious is infinite. There is always more depth. And that isn't bad news. It is simply the nature of being human. We are mysteries to ourselves, and part of the beauty of living is discovering that mystery layer by layer, year after year. It isn't about reaching the finish line. It is about walking the path. Now, I want to speak to you about something practical, about concrete tools you can use for this integration process. The first is therapy. And I know mentioning therapy might sound obvious or inaccessible, but I want to explain why it works and why it is worth it. Therapy works because it gives you something very difficult to get alone. A witness. Someone who sees what you cannot see. Someone who listens without judging. Someone who reflects like a mirror the parts of you that are in your blind spot. The unconscious is called unconscious precisely because you don't see it. It is outside your field of vision. You can intuit. There is something there because of the symptoms, the patterns, the emotions you don't understand. But you cannot see it directly. A good therapist can see it, can point it out, can help you illuminate what was in the darkness. And also, a good therapist creates a safe space, a space where you can feel what you couldn't feel, where you can say what you never said, where you can be all parts of you without fear of rejection. That space in itself is healing, not just because of what is said, but because of the experience of being accepted completely, for the first time, by someone. If you have never gone to therapy, consider trying it. If you went and it didn't work, maybe it was the wrong therapist. Not all therapists are the same. Not all approaches work for everyone. But the process itself, when you find the right way, can change your life. There are different types of therapy that work with the unconscious. Psychoanalysis, coming from Freud. Jungian therapy, working with dreams and archetypes. Somatic therapy, working with the body. EMDR, working with traumas. Gestalt therapy, working with the present and integration of parts. I won't tell you which is better. It depends on you, depends on your story, depends on what you need. The important thing is that you look, and don't give up if the first attempt doesn't work. The second tool is journaling. Writing every day if you can, without filter, without correction, without thinking about who is going to read it, because no one is going to read it. Writing is a way to make the unconscious conscious. When you write without censorship, when you let whatever comes out come out, you often surprise yourself. Things appear that you didn't know you thought. Emotions appear that you didn't know you felt. Connections appear that you hadn't seen. It is as if the hand knows things the mind doesn't know. As if by writing you accessed a different channel, a more direct channel to the basement. Julia Cameron, author of The Artist's Way, recommends writing 3 pages every morning. She calls them the morning pages. 3 pages of whatever, of trash if necessary, of complaints, of fears, of nonsense. The goal isn't to write well. The goal is to empty, to get out what is stuck, to clean the channel. And over time, By emptying the surface, you start to access deeper layers. You start to write things that matter, things that have been waiting years to be said. Another way to use the journal is to write dialogues with parts of yourself. It sounds weird, but it works. You can write a conversation with your inner child, with your shadow, with your fear, with your anger. You ask them questions and let them answer without controlling what they say. It is a way to give voice to the silenced parts, to listen to what they have to say, and often what they say surprises you. The third tool is to pay attention to your dreams. Dreams are messages from the unconscious. They are the way the basement tries to communicate with you. They are full of symbols, of images, of stories that, if you learn to read, reveal things your conscious mind doesn't know. Jung worked a lot with dreams. He said that every character in the dream, every figure, every animal, every object is a part of you. Even the monsters, especially the monsters. If you dream someone is chasing you, who is it? What does it represent? What part of you are you avoiding? If you dream of a house, what is the house like? What rooms are closed? What is in the basement? You don't need a dictionary of symbols. Dreams are personal. What a snake means to you might be completely different from what it means to someone else. The important thing is to ask yourself, what do I feel with this image? What does it remind me of? What part of my life connects with this? To work with dreams, the first thing is to remember them. And to remember them, the best thing is to write them down immediately upon waking, before moving, before thinking about the day, before they evaporate. Keep a notebook next to the bed, and as soon as you wake up, write what you remember, even if they are fragments, even if it makes no sense. Over time, you will remember more, and over time, you will start to see patterns, themes that repeat, messages that the unconscious sends you over and over until you listen to them. The fourth tool is the body. The unconscious doesn't live only in the mind. It lives in the body. Traumas are stored in the muscles. Repressed emotions are kept in the organs. Chronic tension is frozen history. You can spend years talking about your childhood in therapy and keep the same knot in your stomach because the body keeps its own score and needs its own healing. There are many ways to work with the body. Yoga moves stagnant energy. Meditation connects you with sensations you normally ignore. Intense exercise releases accumulated tension. Dancing allows the body to express itself. Deep massages can release emotions stored in the tissues. There are also specific therapies for this: somatic therapy, holotropic breathwork, TRE, trauma-releasing exercises. They all work with the idea that the body needs to complete what was left incomplete. You don't have to do everything, but pay attention to your body. Where is there chronic tension? Where is there pain without medical explanation? What parts of your body do you avoid feeling? Those zones probably hold history, hold emotion, hold the unconscious. And working with them, moving them, breathing into them, simply feeling them, can release things that no amount of thinking would release. The fifth tool is life itself, because true integration doesn't happen on the therapist's couch. It doesn't happen on the meditation cushion. It doesn't happen in the pages of the journal. Those are practice spaces, preparation spaces. Real integration happens in life, in relationships, in work, in conflicts, in daily decisions. Every difficult situation is an opportunity. Every person who bothers you is a mirror. Every intense emotion is a door to the unconscious. The question isn't how to avoid problems. The question is how to use them, how to turn every obstacle into work material, how to see in every conflict an invitation to know yourself better. This doesn't mean looking for problems. It doesn't mean staying in toxic situations to grow. It means that when problems arrive, and they will arrive, you use them. That instead of just suffering them, you look at them. You ask yourself, what does this have to do with me? What pattern of mine is activating? What part of my shadow is in play? Life is the training ground, and if you pay attention, it teaches you exactly what you need to learn. I want to talk to you now about what happens when you integrate, about the changes you can expect. Not to promise you paradise, but to give you an image of where this is going. The first thing that happens is that you become more whole, less fragmented, less at war with yourself. This feeling of being divided, of wanting one thing and doing another, of having parts of you pulling in opposite directions, starts to diminish. It doesn't disappear completely, but it is no longer a civil war. It is more like a negotiation, a dialogue between parts that recognize each other. You have more energy because you no longer spend resources on repressing, on hiding, on keeping doors closed. That energy that was trapped is released, and you can use it to live, to create, to love, for whatever you want. You become more authentic, because you no longer have to maintain an image. You no longer have to pretend to be who you are not. You are no longer so afraid that they will see your flaws, because you already saw them and accepted them. Paradoxically, this makes you more attractive, more magnetic, because people feel authenticity. They feel when someone is real. And in a world of masks, the real is irresistible. Your relationships improve because you stop projecting so much. You stop seeing in others what you don't see in yourself. You stop looking for them to complete you because you already feel more complete. You can see people as they are, not as screens for your projections. And you can love better because real love requires seeing the other, not your fantasy of the other, not the archetype you project, the real other, with their flaws, with their shadow, with their complete humanity. You can only accept in others what you have accepted in yourself. If you don't tolerate your own weakness, you won't tolerate your partner's. If you don't accept your own imperfection, you will demand perfection from the other. But when you accept yourself, you can accept, and love flourishes. You also change your relationship with your emotions. They don't scare you so much anymore. You don't avoid them so much anymore. You can feel sadness without drowning. You can feel rage without exploding. You can feel fear without becoming paralyzed. Emotions become information, not a threat. They tell you something about you, about the situation, about what you need, and you can listen to them, process them, and decide what to do. Instead of being dragged by them blindly, you develop what is called the internal observer, a part of you that can see what is happening without getting lost in it. That can say, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety right now. Interesting. Where does it come from? What do I need? That observer is the mature ego, the integrated ego, the ego that is no longer at the mercy of the id or the superego, but can mediate between them consciously. And perhaps most importantly, you start to live your own life. Not the life they expected for you. Not the life fear dictated. Not the life the pattern repeated automatically. Your life. The one you choose. The one that arises from your center, not from your wounds. That doesn't mean everything is easy. It doesn't mean there are no problems. It doesn't mean you reach a state of permanent happiness. That doesn't exist. What exists is living awake, living present, living choosing instead of reacting. And that, even if it includes pain, even if it includes difficulties, is infinitely better than living asleep. Infinitely better than repeating the same dream thinking you are awake. I want to end with something personal, something you perhaps didn't expect. I also have a shadow. I also have patterns. I also have an unconscious that sometimes controls me without me noticing. I am not speaking to you from the top of a mountain. I am not an enlightened one who already solved everything. I am someone walking the same path as you, who stumbles, who gets lost, who sometimes goes backward. And I tell you all this not because I have overcome it, but because I know it works. Because every time I look at a part of me I would prefer to ignore, I gain a little more freedom. Every time I accept something I rejected, I recover a little more energy. Every time I choose consciously instead of reacting, I get a little closer to who I really am. It isn't a destination, it's a journey, and the simple act of walking it changes everything. Jung died at 85 years old. He had spent his whole life exploring the unconscious, his own and that of thousands of patients. He had written dozens of books. He had mapped psychic territories no one had mapped before. And when they asked him near the end if he had managed to know himself, he answered something memorable. He said, "I am a mystery to myself." He didn't say it with frustration. He said it with awe, with humility, with the wisdom of someone who understands that the inner journey doesn't end, that there is always more depth, that the human soul is ultimately unfathomable. And that isn't a problem. It is the adventure. It is what makes it worth keep exploring, keep asking, keep looking. Your whole life is there waiting for you. Not the life you have lived until now. The life you could live if you knew yourself a little more. If you accepted yourself a little more. If you integrated a little more of what you have exiled. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to do it fast. You just have to start. One step, one look, one acceptance. Today, and tomorrow, another step. And the day after, another. And so, day after day, you find yourself. You recover yourself. You become who you always were beneath everything you were taught to be. Freud once said that the goal of therapy was to convert neurotic misery into ordinary unhappiness. It sounds pessimistic, but it is honest. Permanent happiness does not exist. Life without pain does not exist. But there is a difference between suffering blindly and suffering with meaning. Between repeating the same mistakes and learning from them. Between living asleep and living awake. Jung went further. He said that the goal wasn't just to cure symptoms, but to find meaning. And that meaning is not found. It is created. It is created with every conscious choice, with every integration, with every moment of authenticity. You have that power. The power to create meaning. The power to choose who to be. The power to break the patterns that bind you. You are not a victim of your unconscious. You are its guardian. You are the one who can go down to the basement with a flashlight and decide what to do with what you find. That is the task. That is the adventure. That is perhaps the reason why you are here. We have reached the end of this video. 2 hours exploring the most mysterious territory that exists, the inner territory. We talked about the unconscious, that part of you that makes decisions while you think you decide, that 95% operating in the shadow, directing your life without you knowing. We talked about the shadow, everything you rejected about yourself, everything you exiled to the basement, and how what you deny controls you, how you project it onto others, how it chases you until you look at it. We talked about patterns, the compulsion to repeat the same thing expecting different results, how your unconscious keeps you in cycles, not out of malice, but because it is what it knows. And we talked about integration, about how to break those cycles, about how to recover the exiled parts, about how to make peace with yourself to finally live your own life. None of this changes anything if you don't apply it. If tomorrow you wake up and live exactly like yesterday, if this becomes just an interesting video you watched once, but if something you heard touched you, if you recognize something of yourself in these words, then you have an opportunity to start looking, to start asking, to start changing. You don't need to do everything. Start with one thing. Maybe writing a journal, maybe looking for a therapist, maybe simply observing your reactions with more curiosity and less judgment. One step, just one. Today, that is enough to start changing the direction of the ship. And over time, step by step, you will reach places you cannot even imagine today. Jung ended many of his lectures with a phrase I want to leave with you as well. He said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Awake. Thank you for joining me for these 2 hours. It has been an honor to explore this with you. This has been Quiet Psychology. I am Yana, and I will see you on the next journey.